The law office of Peterson Associates reeked of old leather and expensive cologne. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, feeling distinctly out of place in my department store dress, while my siblings lounged in designer outfits that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The reading of Grandma Eleanor's book wasn't supposed to go this way. The lake house goes to Matthew, Mr. Peterson continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. My oldest brother smiled smugly, already mentally redecorating the $2.5 million vacation property. The stock portfolio and primary residence will be split between Diana and Katherine. My sisters exchanged satisfied glances, no doubt calculating their portion of the multi-million-dollar inheritance. And to my youngest grandchild, Olivia, Mr. Peterson paused, shuffling through his papers. I leave my storage unit at Riverside storage facility, along with its entire contents. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in barely suppressed laughter. Diana didn't even try to hide her smirk. "Well, that's fitting," she said, examining her perfect manicure. Olivia always did have Grandma's strange obsession with old junk. I felt my cheeks burn. While my siblings had pursued respectable careers in finance and law, I'd chosen to become a history professor at a small local college. To them, I was the family disappointment, the one who'd wasted her potential on dusty books and ancient artifacts. "Take it," Matthew waved his hand dismissively. "We don't care about some musty old storage unit, probably just full of worthless antiques and old papers anyway." But something in his voice caught my attention. A slight tension, barely noticeable unless you've grown up learning to read the subtle signs of your older siblings' manipulations. Looking around the room, I noticed it in all of them. A carefully maintained disinterest that seemed just a little too practiced. The distribution of assets being settled. Mr. Peterson concluded, "We can move on to." "Wait," I interrupted, earning annoyed glances from my siblings. "How long has Grandma Eleanor had this storage unit?" Mr. Peterson consulted his notes. "According to our records, Mrs. Harrison rented the unit in 1975, shortly after her husband's death. She maintained it for 47 years, always paid in cash, and left explicit instructions that it was to be given to you, Olivia." 1975. The year Grandpa William died under mysterious circumstances, and our family's fortune suddenly multiplied. I always wondered about that timing, but Grandma Eleanor never discussed it. Whenever anyone asked about Grandpa's death or the source of our wealth, she would simply smile and change the subject. "The unit's probably just full of moth-eaten furniture," Katherine said quickly, too quickly. "You should just have it cleared out, Olivia. I know a good junk removal service." "I'm sure I can handle it myself," I replied, watching their reactions carefully. Was that a flicker of concern in Matthew's eyes? "Don't be stubborn," Diana sighed. "Let us help. We could have it emptied by tomorrow." "That's very thoughtful of you," I said slowly. "But I think I'd like to go through everything myself. After all, it was Grandma's dying wish that I have it." My siblings exchanged looks I couldn't quite interpret. Matthew cleared his throat. "At least let me send some people to help you. That place has been locked up for decades. Could be dangerous, going in alone." "I'll be fine." I stood up, clutching the key Mr. Peterson had given me. "But I'm touched by your sudden concern for my welfare." As I walked out of the law office, I could feel their eyes on my back. In all our years of family dynamics, my siblings had never once offered to help me with anything. Their desperate insistence on helping me clean out the storage unit set off every alarm bell in my mind. The drive to Riverside storage facility gave me time to think. My siblings' behavior wasn't the only thing bothering me. There were other pieces that didn't quite fit. Why had Grandma Eleanor, who lived in luxury and could afford the best secure storage in the city, chosen this modest facility in an industrial area? Why had she paid in cash for 47 years when she handled all her other affairs through proper financial channels? And why had she specifically left it to me, the family member my siblings considered least worthy of inheritance? The facility looked exactly like you'd expect, rows of identical metal units baking in the afternoon sun. The manager's office was empty except for an ancient oscillating fan and a cat sleeping on a stack of paperwork. "Can I help you?" A voice behind me made me jump. An elderly man in a worn uniform peered at me through thick glasses. "I'm here about Unit 247, I said, showing him the key. It belonged to Eleanor Harrison. His eyes widened slightly. "Mrs. Harrison's unit?" Haven't seen anyone go in there since. He paused, thinking. Must be 30 years at least. She'd come by every first of the month, regular as clockwork, with her cash payment. Always polite, but made it clear she didn't want anyone near that unit when she visited. Did you ever see what was inside? He shook his head. Not really my business, is it? But he hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. Sometimes late at night, I'd see her here. She'd spend hours in there, talking to herself, like she was arguing with someone who wasn't there. A chill ran down my spine despite the summer heat. I'd seen Grandma Eleanor talking to herself near the end when her mind started to slip, but she'd been doing it for 30 years. The unit's down at the end, the manager pointed. You need anything, just holler. Name's Frank. Unit 247 looked identical to its neighbors, except for the heavy-duty padlock securing it. My hands trembled slightly as I fitted the key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been regularly maintained. The door creaked open, releasing a rush of stale air. I pulled out my phone, turning on its flashlight. The beam caught dust motes dancing in the air, then landed on something that made my breath catch. The unit wasn't filled with old furniture or worthless junk. Instead, the walls were lined with filing cabinets, each meticulously labeled. A large desk dominated the center of the space, its surface covered in papers protected by clear plastic sheeting. In one corner, a state-of-the-art safe sat bolted to the floor. Definitely not something from 1975. But what really caught my attention was the wall behind the desk. It was covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and documents, all connected by red strings in an intricate web that spoke of decades of investigation. At the center was a photograph I recognized, Grandpa William, taken the day before his death. I stepped closer, examining the materials. Most of the newspaper clippings were financial reports about Harrison Industries, the company that had made our family wealthy. But others were more disturbing. Articles about suspicious deaths, corporate takeovers, and criminal investigations that had mysteriously been abandoned. Oh my God, I whispered, finally understanding why my siblings had been so eager to help clean out the unit. This wasn't storage, it was evidence. Every cabinet, every file, every connected string on that wall told part of a story they desperately wanted to keep hidden. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Matthew. Changed your mind about that help? We could be there in an hour. I looked around the unit again, at 47 years of secrets carefully preserved by a woman everyone had underestimated. Grandma Eleanor hadn't been losing her mind when she talked to herself. She'd been piecing together a puzzle that had started with her husband's death. And now she'd passed that puzzle to me. I texted back, no thanks, just some old furniture, like you said. Nothing interesting. Then I closed and locked the door, my mind racing. I needed time to process what I found, to understand why Grandma had chosen me to inherit this dangerous legacy. But one thing was clear. My siblings hadn't dismissed the storage unit out of disinterest. They'd wanted it gone because they knew exactly what it contained. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of the key in my pocket. Grandma Eleanor had spent nearly 5 decades building this case in secret, maintaining a false image of a wealthy, slightly dotty old woman while meticulously documenting something dark at the heart of our family's fortune. Now that work, and its consequences, belonged to me. The family disappointment, the one they thought could be safely ignored. I smiled, thinking of my siblings' practiced disinterest in the law office. They had no idea that their perfect plan, letting the least important family member take possession of dangerous evidence, was exactly what Grandma Eleanor had counted on. Because sometimes the person they least expect is exactly the person they should fear the most. Later that night in my small apartment, I spread out the first set of documents I'd carefully smuggled out of the storage unit. My dining table disappeared under a layer of papers, photographs, and hastily scrawled notes. The first thing I noticed was the organization. Grandma Eleanor hadn't just collected evidence. She created a detailed catalog of corruption, betrayal, and possible murder that stretched back decades. Each piece was meticulously dated and cross-referenced, building a case that would have impressed my most demanding academic colleagues. One document caught my eye, a handwritten letter from my grandfather to Grandma Eleanor, dated the day before his death. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct. The board meeting tomorrow isn't about expansion plans. They're going to confront me about the missing money, about the offshore accounts I discovered. I've hidden the proof where they'll never find it, but I fear it won't be enough to protect me. I'm sorry to leave you with this burden, but you're the only one I can trust. Watch the children carefully, especially Matthew. He's too much like his uncle, too eager for power at any cost. All my love, William. My hands trembled as I read the letter again. Uncle James, Matthew's namesake and role model, had taken control of Harrison Industries after Grandpa's death. The official story was that Grandpa had died of a heart attack during a board meeting. But according to the newspaper clippings Grandma had collected, the only doctor present had been James's personal physician. A knock at my door made me jump. It was past midnight. Who could be visiting at this hour? I quickly gathered the documents, stuffing them into my bedroom before approaching the door. Olivia? It's Diana. Open up. My sister's voice was casual, but something about it set off warning bells. Diana never visited me. In fact, she made a point of avoiding my depressingly modest apartment. Just a minute, I called out, buying time to think. Through the peephole, I could see Diana wasn't alone. Matthew stood slightly behind her, his expression hidden in shadow. We were in the neighborhood, Diana said as I opened the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Thought we'd check on you after today. Must be disappointing getting stuck with Grandma's old junk while we got everything else. Actually, I'm fine with it, I replied, blocking the doorway. But it's pretty late for a social call. Did you go to the storage unit yet? Matthew asked, trying to peer past me into the apartment. Not yet. Been too busy grading papers. The lie came easily, planning to check it out this weekend. Diana's smile flickered slightly. We really should help you with that. In fact, we could go right now. Neither of us is busy. At midnight, I raised an eyebrow. That's dedicated of you. We just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed, Matthew said smoothly. Family helps family, right? Family helps family. The same thing they'd said when they convinced me to give up my share of Dad's inheritance 10 years ago, promising to manage it better than a naive graduate student could. I'd never seen a penny of that money. I appreciate the offer, I said firmly, but I can handle it. Now if you'll excuse me, I have an early class tomorrow. As I closed the door, I heard Diana whisper something to Matthew. Their footsteps retreated down the hall, but somehow I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. I returned to my bedroom, pulling out the documents I'd hidden. A photo slipped from between the pages. Grandma Eleanor as a young woman, standing next to Grandpa William. They were both smiling, but there was something sad in Grandma's eyes, as if she already knew what was coming. What were you trying to tell me? I whispered to her image. What am I supposed to do with all of this? The answer came from another document, a letter Grandma had written just months before her death. But never sent, my dearest Olivia. They think I chose you because you're the weak one, the one they can control. They never understood that strength doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like patience, like quiet observation, like a professor who knows how to research and analyze and wait for the right moment. I've spent 47 years building this case, knowing I might not live to see justice done. Now I'm entrusting it to you. Be smarter than I was. Be more careful. And when the time comes, be stronger than they expect. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. I stayed up until dawn, reading through the files. With each document, each photograph, each piece of evidence, a picture emerged of corruption so deep it made me sick. Harrison Industries hadn't just been successful. It had been built on fraud, manipulation, and possibly murder. And my siblings hadn't just inherited wealth. They'd inherited a legacy of secrets they would do anything to protect. As the sun rose over the city, I made a decision. Grandma Eleanor had spent nearly 5 decades gathering evidence. Now it was my turn to use it. They thought the family disappointment would be easy to handle. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Over the next week, I developed a routine. By day, I taught my classes and maintained my normal schedule, playing the role of the unambitious academic my siblings expected. But at night, I visited the storage unit, carefully documenting everything inside. What I found was staggering. Financial records showing massive fraud, correspondence proving corporate espionage, and most disturbing of all, evidence suggesting that Grandpa William's death wasn't the only suspicious one in Harrison Industries' history. Someone's been asking questions at the facility. Frank, the storage manager, caught me as I was leaving one evening. His voice was low, concerned. Your brother, tall guy, expensive suit? He came by yesterday, wanted to know if anyone had accessed the unit. I told him what you asked me to, that you'd looked inside once and never came back. I nodded, grateful for the old man's discretion. After my siblings' midnight visit, I'd explained enough to Frank to earn his cooperation. He'd known Grandma Eleanor for decades, and something about her had earned his loyalty. Did they believe you? Frank shrugged. Hard to say, but they hired someone to watch the place. Black SUV parked across the street every night this week. I'd noticed the surveillance but hadn't let on. Thanks, Frank. Be careful, okay. You too, Miss Harrison. Whatever's in that unit, it's worth killing for, isn't it? I thought of Grandpa William's letter, of the other deaths Grandma had documented. Yes, I think it is. Back home, I reviewed my findings. The evidence was damning, but scattered. Grandma Eleanor had gathered the pieces, but hadn't assembled them into a coherent narrative. That was my job now. My phone buzzed. Another text from Matthew. Family dinner tomorrow night. Non-negotiable. I stared at the message, remembering Grandma's warning about Matthew being too much like Uncle James. In the documents I'd found, James emerged as the architect of much of the corruption, with Matthew as his eager protege. Can't make it, I texted back. Departmental meeting. The response was immediate. Cancel it. This is important. A moment later, Diana added, Don't be difficult, Olivia. Family comes first. Family comes first. How many times had they used that phrase to manipulate me? To silence questions about our wealth, about Grandpa's death, about the way Harrison Industries did business. But they were right about one thing. This dinner would be important, just not in the way they expected. The next evening, I arrived at Diana's penthouse apartment exactly on time. Katherine opened the door, eyeing my simple dress with her usual disdain. You could have made an effort, she sighed. We have important guests tonight. The living room was crowded with familiar faces. Matthew and Diana, of course. Uncle James, looking distinguished in his expensive suit. Several Harrison Industries board members. And in a corner, a man I recognized from Grandma's photographs. Thomas Weber, the company's longtime legal counsel. Olivia, Matthew called out, his smile too bright. Come meet everyone properly, as a family. The emphasis on family wasn't subtle. This was a show of force, meant to intimidate me with their unified front. Actually, I said, setting my bag down carefully, I think it's time we talked about what family really means in the Harrison household. The room went quiet. Uncle James set down his drink, his expression hardening. Perhaps this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I pulled out a folder, one of many copies I'd made. Shall we start with Grandpa William's murder, or would you prefer to discuss the other deaths first? The silence turned deadly. Matthew took a step toward me, but Diana caught his arm. Murder? Thomas Weber's lawyer voice was smooth, practiced. Your grandfather died of natural causes. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what you told them, I corrected, opening the folder. But Grandma Eleanor knew better. She spent 47 years gathering evidence she left to me. That crazy old woman. James laughed, but there was an edge of fear in it. She spent her last years talking to ghosts. No, Uncle James. She spent them talking to her dead husband, asking his forgiveness for not being able to prove what you did to him sooner. I began laying out documents on Diana's expensive coffee table, the offshore accounts Grandpa William discovered, the missing funds he was going to expose, the convenient heart attack that silenced him. And then there were the others, the whistleblowers who died in accidents, the investigators who disappeared. These are lies, Matthew snarled. Delusional fantasies from a bitter old woman. Really? I pulled out my phone, playing a recording I found in the storage unit. Grandpa William's voice from a meeting the day before his death, confronting James about the missing money. James's face went white. Where did you get that? From the storage unit you so desperately wanted to empty. The one Grandma maintained for nearly 5 decades, gathering evidence while you all dismissed her as a harmless widow. Katherine's hands were shaking. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I want justice, I said simply, for Grandpa William, for all the others whose deaths you arranged, for every person Harrison Industries destroyed in its climb to the top. You'll never prove any of this. Thomas Weber said, but his confidence was cracking. No court would accept. The SEC would. The FBI too. In fact, I smiled, they already have. Grandma's evidence, along with everything I've added this week, was delivered to them this morning. The explosion of activity was exactly what I'd expected. Matthew lunged for me, but I stepped back, watching as Uncle James grabbed him. "Don't," James hissed. "Not here. Not now." "It's too late anyway," I continued calmly. "Everything's been documented, distributed to multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me, it all goes public immediately." Diana was crying now, her perfect makeup running. "Why? Why would you do this to your own family?" "Because real family doesn't murder each other," I replied. "Real family doesn't build its fortune on death and fraud." Grandma Eleanor understood that. So did Grandpa William. And now finally, justice will be done. As if on cue, the penthouse door burst open. FBI agents poured in, followed by SEC investigators. The look of shock on James's face as he was handcuffed was almost worth 47 years of waiting. Hours later, after the arrests and the initial statements, I stood in the storage unit one last time. The evidence was gone now, secured by federal agents, but I could still feel Grandma Eleanor's presence. "Well done," a voice said behind me. Frank stood in the doorway, but he wasn't wearing his facility uniform anymore. He held up an FBI badge. "Your grandmother would be proud." I stared at him, understanding finally dawning. "You were her contact. All these years." He nodded. "Eleanor came to me after William's death, convinced it was murder but unable to prove it. I was a young agent then, but I believed her. We spent decades building this case, waiting for the right moment, the right person to bring it all together. And she chose me. Because you were the only one who inherited her strength, the patience to wait, to observe, to strike at exactly the right moment." He smiled. "The family disappointment, they called you. They never realized that was your greatest advantage." In the following weeks, the Harrison Industries empire crumbled. The evidence was irrefutable. Decades of fraud, corruption, and murder, all meticulously documented by a woman everyone had underestimated. Matthew, Diana, and Katherine were charged as accessories after the fact, their inherited wealth seized as proceeds of crime. Uncle James and the board members faced multiple murder charges. The family's carefully maintained facade of respectability shattered completely. 1 year later, I stood at Grandma Eleanor's grave, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. "The estate's been settled," I told her quietly. "The victims' families have been compensated. Harrison Industries is being reformed under new leadership, with strict oversight." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice, not the dotty old woman my siblings had mocked, but the brilliant, patient investigator who had spent nearly 5 decades preparing for this moment. I placed something else beside the flowers, the key to storage unit 247. "Thank you for choosing me," I whispered. "For seeing what they didn't, for trusting me to finish what you started." As I walked away, I thought about the true meaning of inheritance. My siblings had inherited wealth, power, and a legacy of corruption, but Grandma Eleanor had left me something far more valuable: the truth and the strength to use it. They had called me the family disappointment, had given me a worthless storage unit while they divided up millions. But in the end, that storage unit contained something no amount of money could buy: justice, 47 years in the making. Later that evening, in my office at the university, I received an envelope from Frank, now retired from the FBI. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before, showing Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa William on their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of hope. A note in Frank's handwriting accompanied it. "Eleanor always said the truth was like archaeology. Sometimes it takes decades of careful digging to uncover what's really there. You proved her right. The family disappointment turned out to be the family's redemption." I pinned the photograph to my wall, next to my degrees and academic awards. A reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in power or money, but in the patience to wait, the courage to stand alone, and the wisdom to know exactly when to strike. The storage unit was empty now, its secrets finally revealed. But its legacy would live on, not in wealth or property, but in the triumph of truth over power, of justice over greed, of one woman's determination to right a decades-old wrong. They had given me what they thought was nothing, Instead, it had been everything. Everything needed to bring down an empire built on lies, to expose secrets buried in darkness, to prove that sometimes the person they least expect is exactly the person they should have feared most.